I'm David Grayson. I run the Doughty Centre for Corporate Responsibility at the Cranfield School of Management, and I'm one of the editors of Cranfield on Corporate Sustainability, a unique venture between almost 30 of our faculty and associates in the School of Management, talking about their perspectives on how sustainability affects the way in which they research and teach their particular management discipline. I'm talking to Professor Mike Bourne about the chapter which he wrote with David Ferguson and Pippa Bourne about how to deal with sustainability in terms of business performance. Mike, are you seeing these issues of how you manage water or carbon or energy as something which is becoming more important for the organisations that you study?
I think the organisations that recognise that this is a problem for them, it's coming right to the fore for them. You get examples of organisations that find that they can't actually grow peas in the north of England, in the south of England anymore. They need cooler climates and need to go north. So there are things like that that are happening. And in particular, in some of the retail environments, people are starting to understand that the public has this as an issue on their agenda as well.
Is the management of these issues and how you improve your performance in terms of the management both of the risks and the opportunities associated with your social, economic and environmental impacts, are these qualitatively different issues to anything else that you are studying and teaching about in terms of how you improve organisational performance?
I don't think they are. I think it's how do we manage sustainability within the management of the organisation. That's the real thing that matters. The thing about sustainability is people can see it coming. There are some big trends which are coming, which are actually not happening as fast as some of the smaller trends within the economy, and therefore people have got time to plan for it. The question really is whether people do take that time to plan for it and do something about it in advance.
And what's your advice to busy managers with lots of other more short-term pressures as they perceive it in their inbox? How do you improve your performance in relation to sustainability?
You've got to think long-term. It's very difficult to change the way that you're operating in the short term. So one of the things you've got to do is to look to the future and say, what is going to be different? If carbon is going to be much more expensive, what are we going to do about it over the next 5-10 years to do something? Having a conversation recently with a hotel chain, and they're saying, where do we place our hotels? Do we put them on motorways? Are people going to be driving cars? Do we put them on airports? Or are people going to travel by train? That's a very fundamental question. And it's only just woken up to it recently.
So one of the critical issues for management is to make sure that they are using either some scenario planning or some other device which helps them to visualize potential possible futures and to anticipate the kinds of changes that they might be confronted with as a result of the environmental and social pressures that are now facing us, and to become more resilient in terms of responding to them.
I think so. Scenarios are very useful, but there's some very basic questions you can ask yourself. Is the material that you need to make the product going to be available in a few years' time? And for some people, it isn't just simply not going to be there. Is what you're doing going to be acceptable in several years' time? And again, in some cases, it's not going to be. So if that's the case, what are you going to do about it? So sometimes it is about scenarios. What happens if carbon goes up to this level? What can we do about it? But quite often it's thinking about some of the basics of what your organisation does and get those right and then respond to them now rather than suddenly being confronted with them in the future.
And in your chapter of Cranfield on Corporate Sustainability, you offer some tools and techniques for enabling an organisation then to be more successful at improving your performance as a result of having that better understanding.
Yeah. We've got a series of questions which we ask about some of these things. We talk about stakeholder analysis and understand the strengths of the stakeholders and how active they are going to be as part of that analysis. We've then put a set of performance measures in the book. Rather than performance measures, a framework that you can use to design the performance measures that you use, and then some advice how you use those measures in the general management of the business, sustainability as long with everything else.
And parting messages to a CEO who's still not quite convinced that this really matters to the business performance of the organisation that he or she's running?
This really matters. It may not happen in your 10-year time as CEO, but the markets are picking up on the lack of resources and some of the things that are coming in place, and it will affect the share price before you retire, to be put it blunt and quite cynically.
Mike Bourne, thank you very much indeed.